Hello and welcome to the Reality of Dreams. I'm your host, Robin Cunningham with Fireside Grace Ministries, and I am so glad to see everybody here. So today, I want to talk about something that's important to me, and it's the difference between visions and dreams. And there has been somewhat a good amount of ambiguity in the difference between visions and dreams and what that really looks like. So we're going to cover that in today's show. All right, welcome back in here. I accidentally left my phone downstairs, so I'm going to have to pull up the notes on my MacBook. So thankfully, I have a MacBook, and I can just pull things up here, and hopefully everything works. I'm sorry for those of you who typically watch on Rumble. I tried to do this on Rumble, also streaming simultaneously, but it wouldn't let me play it live on Rumble, so I will have to upload it later after I'm done recording today. So today I want to talk about dreams and visions and what the difference is, and this is going to be based off of what I heard a few nights ago while I was asleep, and I want to share that with you. So I'm going to take a second and give people a little bit of time to sign on. I'm glad that you're all here. Hello, DSR, Richard's Legacy, Mandy F, Overflow Grace, everybody. Remember to like and subscribe. Share this with your friends and family. Get the word out. If you have dreams that need to be interpreted, I'm going to try and keep this to about 45 minutes. This is a kind of a long teaching, so I might not get to dreams tonight, but I'm certainly going to try. All right, so, just a little witty banter. It's not even witty banter. I'm actually just going to read you something that I think is absolutely hilarious. So, in August of last year, I got diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and of course it was my fault because I let myself go. I got real fat, and basically just got real fat. And so when you get fat, you typically get diabetes, it seems like, right? So I worked hard. I've lost 50 pounds, and one of the things that I've had to come to terms with is that I don't get to eat carbs like bread and stuff. And so what I've been substituting bread with these days is cauliflower bread, and it's low carb. It's actually high cholesterol, so I try and stay away from it. But pretty much when you can't have carbs now, the answer is to turn to cauliflower. And cauliflower is basically, here's what I want to say. Cauliflower, it kind of tastes like someone ate 50 or so hard-boiled eggs, and then they waited an hour and let those eggs just ferment inside their gut, and then farted straight hot fart into the dirt, making a fart seed, and then lovingly cultivated that fart seed for 2 months, watering it with manuring it, just making it the most pungent, aromatic, fragrant flower of poop that they could ever make. And then it grew up into a nice little fart flower, and then someone harvested it on the hottest, ripest day and in the summer's heat in Arizona when it's 130 degrees out, and then put it on a plate and tried to convince somebody that it tastes just like mashed potatoes when in actuality it's a fart flower. So that has nothing to do with dreams, but I just wanted to maybe make you guys laugh a little bit for a second while I get into this topic. It's been a long time since I talked about poop or anything like that, right? So just the imagery, why does cauliflower smell so bad? Well, I'll tell you one thing though about cauliflower. It tastes great. But I'll tell you something though. They have this thing called cauliflower wings, and the best way to eat cauliflower wings is to put it in a trash can, light the trash can on fire, and then throw the trash can into space on a trajectory course with the sun. Now, I know that space is a vacuum and fire shouldn't burn, but maybe that gas that comes from cauliflower will make it burn the entire way. Maybe it'll give it some sort of dynamic propulsion that'll push it into the sun, right? But I tell you what, if I'm ever at a Super Bowl thing or something, let's say the Super Bowl becomes Christian again or something like that, and somebody feeds me and a wing, and I bite into that wing, and it tastes like cauliflower, like fart flowers, somebody's catching hands. I'm just saying that right now. Someone's catching hands if I bite into a wing and it tastes like fart flour. Okay? All right. Let's go ahead and get into this lesson. All right. I wouldn't actually eat somebody. I do like cauliflower. I do think that it tastes pretty good. It's just a little stinky. I wouldn't eat it straight up by itself, but you put some ranch on it or on something, it usually tastes pretty good. Or ketchup. Unfortunately, ranch has less carbs than ketchup, so I can't put ketchup on everything anymore. But if I could, ketchup makes it taste better. All right. So a few days ago, I had a dream. In the dream, it was just darkness. It was just someone talking to me, and I don't recall if it was God, Jesus, Holy Spirit, an angel, a demon. I'm not 100% sure. But whatever was said had sparked my interest because it's something that I had pondered before in the past. And it was, they said, all dreams are visions, but not all visions are dreams. There are different types of visions. And I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. I'd never even thought of that. And so sometimes when God speaks, he'll speak to me like that in a way that's kind of ambiguous that causes me to go into research. Because when someone gets my attention or someone says something, the first thing that I do is I jump into the Word of God and I start to research what it is that was being said, okay? And so I had to go look at this because what I was taught was that dreams are symbolic and visions are literal, but sometimes visions can have symbolism in them. I'm like, well, if a vision has symbolism in it, then how is that different from a dream, which is a vision, which is symbolic but has a meaning? And one of the things is like, it just confused me because how do you tell the difference? Like I know in a dream you can tell if something's a vision based on if you're looking out of a window. It's pertaining to vision because it's how you see. One of the words for vision, I forget the exact word. I think it might be maracosa or something like that. And it literally means to look at in a reflecting glass. So in that example, when it's used in Hebrew, it says God will reveal himself as though you're looking into a reflecting glass, or looking glass, a mirror, I guess, is how you would say it. So I just find that interesting, and there's different types of vision. There's the vision where you can actually see something with your physical eyes, and there's spiritual vision. So we're going to get into that, okay? But first, let's talk about halom. And what a halom is. A halom is the Hebrew word for dream. And let's talk about the history of the word dream for a second, and we'll get into it from there because this really correlates into the different type of dreams because certain dreams can be a trance-like state in some sense, okay? So the word halom in Hebrew has a lot of interesting meanings or supposed meanings like to bind firmly, to be healthy, to be dumb, as in you can't speak. And of course, it can mean dream or dreamer. But nobody really knows the exact etymology or origin of the word or where it came from. I find it interesting that halom and chazon, the words for dream and vision, are very, very similar. Similarly spelled. Of course, they're not exactly spelled the same way. It could just be a coincidence that they both start with those words, but surely there's no coincidence, right? Now, of course, we have the word dream in English. This derives from Dutch and Germanic to the best of our knowledge of where it came from. There was also a word dream in Old English back when it was still a Germanic language. But Dutch was droom, D-R-O-O-M, and German is Traum, T-R-A-U-M, and both words meant dream or vision, right? And then a nightmare was considered something separate, and in the Bible, it tells us nightmares are something separate also, which we'll get into in this lesson as well. So in English, the word dream meant joy, singing, rejoice, playing music, and it was referring to anything that brought joy or merriment in a musical sense. And it reminds me of Psalms 98:4, where it says, "Make a joyful noise unto the Lord, all the earth. Make a loud noise and rejoice and sing praise." And now there was Scandinavian influence in England and Scotland and Ireland in the 1580s. Around there is when they speculate when the word dream took on the meaning, that word DREAM, which was dream in Old English, took on the new meaning, which is dreams and visions from the word droom or drom. And then, of course, as the years went on, over the course of, 500 years, half a millennia or so, of course, now dreams mean dreams and visions. It can mean, living the life, being happy, being in utter bliss. It can represent your what it is that you want to do with your life, your aspirations, what your plans are for your future, and all of this stuff. Like when someone says we're living the dream, or I dream that one day, my dream is that one day I can do this, or one day I can do that. So it's what you hope for in the future. So dream has a lot of meanings now, but back in the past, it could be it was very strict to just dreams and visions, period. Now it means a lot more than it used to. So dreams and visions both occur when we're asleep, and they occur when we're awake. All right. It's not that often that we have daydreams, which are obviously dreams that you have while you're in the day. But we do have those once in a while. A lot of times we will mistake them for visions when they might actually be daydreams because they're symbolic. And other times we'll have visions and maybe think that that's a dream, but it was symbolic. But we're going to get into that, okay? So daydreams don't typically manifest like a normal dream because usually you're awake when you have a daydream, all right? So it's usually kind of a passing thought that has a mental image associated with it. And I used to have daydreams when I was a kid, and I didn't realize that was happening. I actually think that I might have been being translated or being taken into visions to see things as a Roa seer. And I believe that I'm a Roa seer and also a Hazon seer. I see in vision also, but we'll get into that in a second. So one example is like we'd be going down 5S towards Utica past the fart flower garbage dump. It always stunk back then. It was the 1980s, early 90s. And that was before they were capping it for the methane and stuff, and it just smelled like a dump, and we would just hold our breath, right? So there was, if you're from a place where you have like hills or mountains or whatever, depending on where you're from, you might consider those mountains in New York. No New Yorker in Ilion and the Utica area will say that they have mountains, but we actually do have mountains. They're just not what we consider mountains. We consider them hills. But New York has a lot of mountains. You Adirondacks, you got the Catskills, you got the Appalachians. Some people say Appalachians, but I'm from New York. We say Appalachian, right? That's the proper way to say Appalachian. But everybody else in the country says Appalachian or something like that. But whatever. So we'd be going past that, and when you're on 5S, you see the garbage dump off in the distance off to the right when you're headed towards Utica. And there's like a drop-off next to the garbage dump that goes down like 200, 300 feet. And it's not straight down, but it's a very sharp gradient of like, probably like close to 45, not quite a 90-degree angle. So like maybe 70, 80-degree angle like this, but it's pretty sharp. And I would all of a sudden be in a car, the car got hit or something happened, the car was flipping, and we were rolling in the air and hitting all these trees and coming down, and we'd hit the bottom of the ravine, and I would just black out and go unconscious, and then just like that, I'd blink my eyes, and I'm back in my car. So I will blink, I'd be in that vision, and then I'd blink back, and boom, that happened. And it happened several times, makes me wonder if there was a demon in that area that would cause me to go into that, because that's not something that I thought about. That's not something I was afraid of, but it happened a lot when we go past that area. Another time would be when I was in first grade. I think my teacher's name in first grade was Mrs. Cole or something like that. No, that was my fifth grade teacher. It was Miss Moorhead. Miss Moorhead, Miss Bisley, Miss McMahon, and I forget who my other teacher was. But anyway, let's just say it was Miss Moorhead. So I have a vision, and I'm on my couch. I'm in my house, and then all of a sudden, I am in school. I didn't realize when I was in school that I had even been on my couch at my home at all. In that moment, I was there in school. I knew that was where I was supposed to be. I looked around. All of my friends were there. in school, the teacher asked a question, and I raised my hand to answer because I knew the answer to the question. And then all of a sudden I blinked, and I was back in my living room again with my arm raised up like this, and my dad looking at me and goes, "Why is your hand raised?" And I was like, "Well, the teacher just asked a question. I'm going to answer the question." And then I look around, and he's like, "What teacher? What are you even talking about right now?" And I'm like, where am I right now? And I was back in my living room. So I don't know if I was actually transported or if that was just a vision. Usually when those things happened, I would see them and they would actually happen. But that one with falling, that was not something that that actually happened in real life, as far as I know. But, I tried to pray a little bit here and there when I was a kid because my grandma said, but, that's something for another time. So anyway, it could have been a translation. It could have been maybe a time travel. I don't know. But I'm just going to call it a daydream. So today, using our modern biblical terminology, we might even call that a trance. And that could be the case. That could have been a trance. But a trance in Greek is the word ecstasis. And ecstasis literally means to stand outside of. And it implies that you're completely taken out of your regular state of being and you're put into a different state. You're in a state outside of the normal or the outside of that state, whatever. And so it actually refers to it as it translates as trance. Well, Merriam-Webster defines the word trance as a sleep-like state, usually characterized by partly suspended animation with diminished or absent sensory and motor activity. So just to read that one more time, it is partly suspended animation. It's a sleep-like state, usually characterized by partly suspended animation with diminished or absent sensory and motor activity. And so this is very similar to how a dream operates, actually, because, and so when you're in a trance, it means you're partially inhibited, but when you are in a dream state, you should be completely inhibited. So when you have, let's say you're sleepwalking or something like that, you're partially inhibited. That means you're actually in a trance and not in a deep sleep state. Some people would say, well, that doesn't make sense, this, that, or the other thing. But that's what it is. According to the definition of what a trance is, that's where you are. And so in dreams, our body becomes paralyzed by this chemical that our body creates in order to keep us from acting out our dreams. Because when you have a dream, you don't actually have a dream. The dream has you. So anyway, as I stated previously in the beginning of this lesson, dreams and visions are both forms of visions, all right? However, a dream type of vision is typically more symbolic, but it will have a literal meaning. That does not mean that the dream is literal. So if you have a dream that you're married to somebody, like say you're married to John Paul Jackson or somebody like that, right? And he's a prophet, but he was married to Diane, and you're married to whoever you're married to, and now he's dead. He's not dead. His body's dead. He's alive. He's in heaven. He can still talk to people, and he still does visit people in heaven from time to time. I know for a fact, and I don't know if the person ever told me this, but I know for a fact that he visited one of his students in the past couple of years because I've seen it. But anyway, you have a dream that you're married to, say, John Paul Jackson. Well, he's passed away, right? So that dream is symbolic. What would it mean? It would mean that you're being called into whatever it was that John Paul Jackson was prophetic about, and that will be dreams and dream interpretation, what he's known for. And you're being called to learn from him or come into agreement with him and get familiar with him in a more intimate way. And by intimate, I don't mean sleeping with him. I mean in a way where you get familiar with what he's teaching, and you basically come into agreement with it in a relational type of sense. Okay? So that would be the literal meaning of the dream. But that didn't mean that the dream was literal, that you were going to marry John Paul Jackson. Does that make sense? All right. So anyway, I have heard from some people that not all dreams have meanings, but I have not in 15 years of doing dream interpretation, and I know there's people out there who have been doing it longer than me and have probably interpreted more dreams than me. but I have never come across a dream that does not have an interpretation. I've come across dreams where I've had to pray, and sometimes I have to pray for days or weeks, sometimes a month before I get the interpretation, and then I get back to it and I get the interpretation. But usually, because I've never come across one that doesn't have an interpretation, what I find is that's usually an invitation into intimacy with the Lord to seek Him out for the answer. Now, you could say that you could just take something and prophesy into what you see. Now, one thing that I've noticed is usually when a dream seems to not have an interpretation, it's because it's literal and it's something that's going to happen, and you have to be able to discern that. But this has happened to me before. I had a dream that I was in an office and I was teaching my boss how to do my job, but I didn't have that boss. I told my friend, like, that boss didn't exist that I was aware of. I told my friend the dream, and he said, "What do you think that means?" I said, "I think it means I'm going to be teaching my boss how to do my job." And that guy ended up getting hired, and within a week after having that dream, he got hired after I had the dream, and I had the dream before he was working here, before I knew who he was. So he was going to all of the different stations and stuff and learning how to do his job as manager. And so I worked in the cash office, so I taught him how to do everything in the cash office. And that was literal. But you could very easily take that dream, which was literal, and prophesy different aspects into it. And the reason for that's Romans 1:20. And I won't pretend like everyone knows what Romans 1:20 says, but it does say that. Let me just pull it up here for you. I know exactly what it says, but I want to read it to you. It says, "For ever since the world was created, people have seen the earth and sky. Through everything God made, they can clearly see His invisible qualities, His eternal power and divine nature, so they have no excuse for not knowing God." So let's read that in King James, okay? I like the King James says it pretty better. That was very clear and to the point. It says, "For the invisible things of Him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even His eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse." And that means in the day of judgment. So what that is showing us is that everything that exists has a symbolic meaning to it. That means that everything that exists, you can take something from something that's literal in front of you, or a dream that you had that was literal and was a premonition of what was going to come, and prophesy into that from items and things that you see there, because there is symbolic meaning in every single thing. There's symbolic meaning in this coffee cup, okay? There's symbolic meaning in this microphone. There's symbolic meaning in everything. Why? How do I know this? Because everything that happened in the Bible where we get our symbols from actually happened in real life, except for the dreams. But it's not like they were sitting there saying, "I wonder what the symbolism is of this." They were living it. And then we go back, and their life was symbolic. Why? Romans 1:20. Everything was created to point to the glory of God, so that no one is without excuse in the day of judgment. Okay? So, anyway, usually visions, when you're awake, are pretty straightforward. They're usually very literal, but more often than that, visions do have symbols in them, okay? So there are a couple of different words for vision in Hebrew, and the two I want to focus on today are hazah and ra'ah, or ra'ah, however you say it. I'll probably say ra'ah or ra'ah on and off because I'm not convinced on how to say it yet, right? But there are also several different variations of these words, and from those variations, we get the ideas, which I'll do another lesson on, the different types of visions that you can have, okay? So ra'ah refers to seeing with your eyes. Typically, it's talking about seeing with your natural eyes, but it can also be meaning your spiritual eyes or your physical eyes. And typically, it does mean physically, but in many instances in the Bible, it does mean to discern something, which you discern something in your spiritual. So we see that in Genesis 1:4, Genesis 3:6, and in Genesis 48:3. It uses the word ra'ah as to discern. Like in Genesis 1:4, it says, "And God saw," and that means that, and He discerned, He perceived, He decided that it was good, because He saw the day, and the day was good, right? He says, and it was the day, And he called it a day. It was the fourth day or whatever, and he said, and it is good, right? He didn't actually see a day. When I say Monday to you, do you see a form and shape of a Monday? Or maybe you see a calendar with a Monday on it, but we don't see the actual day. Do you understand what I'm saying? Really, the word day is more or less just symbolic of something that you can't see. It's kind of like the verbalization of an invisible thing that exists, but you can only verbalize it, even though you can't actually see it. So, like, ever think about that? Like, thank God I am not a pothead, or else I would be like, "Whoa, man, that's deep," or something, right? Anyway, those instances, and also in Genesis 3:6, it says that that's when Eve saw that the fruit was good to eat. Well, she didn't just look at the fruit all of a sudden and was like, oh, yeah, that fruit is good to eat. It's ripe. It's ready now. No, she perceived that it was good to eat. Okay, now we see in Exodus 21 through 23, there's the word mara'ah, and that means to discern or perceive. It actually means to behold, look, prophesy, provide, or see, and to gaze at, mentally perceive, or to contemplate with pleasure, or to have a vision. All right. And we see this in Exodus 21 through 23. It says, moreover, you shall select from all the people able men, such as fear God, men of truth, hating covetousness, and place such over them to be rulers of thousands, rulers of hundreds, rulers of fifties, and rulers of tens. And let them judge the people at all time. Then it will be that every great matter they will bring to you, but every small matter they themselves shall judge. So it will be easier for you, for they will bear the burden with you. If you do this thing, and God so commands you, then you will be able to endure, and all this people will also go to their place in peace. Now, in this context, Moses is discerning by seeing with his spiritual eyes and selecting these leaders. Now, since the word means to prophesy, to see, vision, or discern, it's showing that Moses had to perceive with his spiritual man. And remember, to prophesy doesn't just mean to predict the future, but it means to foretell or tell people what God's heart or will is in a situation or manner. Okay, so when he had to prophesy who the leaders were, he had to perceive with his heart what was God's will and who was it that was God's will to be the leader of Israel over those 70 people, right? So here he has to discern and perceive whomever he was supposed to choose to lead Israel. Well, in a few chapters later, we see both the word Reah and Chazah mentioned in the same passage, but they're two different words. You'd think, well, they have similar meanings, that you saw and you saw, or you saw and vision, right? Or maybe they both mean vision, because a lot of times they're both used as the word vision, right? So Exodus 24, 9 through 11 says, Then went up Moses and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and they saw the God of Israel, and there was under his feet, as it were, a paved work of a sapphire stone, and as it were the body of heaven in its clearness. And upon the stone, and upon the nobles of the children of Israel, he laid not his hand. Also, they saw God, and did eat and drink. Okay, so verse 10 says, Yariu, which is derived from the word Reah, and it says Yariu God, meaning they physically saw him with their actual physical eyes, right? Then in verse 11, it says, And he laid not his hand upon the nobles of the children of Israel, and they saw God. So they saw God, and then Moses gets a little bit redundant in writing this and says, and they saw God. And they saw God and they ate and drank. They saw God and then they saw God while they were eating and drinking. Okay, thanks, Moses, for saying that the same thing, right? In English, that's how we perceive it, but that's not what actually happened. He said two different words. They saw with their physical eyes and they perceived something with their spirit. So what they perceived actually goes back to when it says he laid not his hand on them. That means he didn't bring judgment on them. Literally, the word that we have here for he laid not his hand on them was the word for to lay hands on means to use his power to cast away, to forsake, to push away. And so when he didn't send them away, they perceived all of them that they actually deserve to be cast away. They deserve to be pushed away. You know, to be cast away in the New Testament is what they say when they're casting a devil out of someone. They cast it away. It's a reference to throwing away something as though it were garbage and you just toss it off. You know, Israel at this point had a history of defying God and still has a history of defying God, in that, you know, they did all of these things that were evil. You know, when Moses said, go gather the bread, he said, don't take any extra bread, but people went out and gathered extra bread and tried to save it for the next day. Then the bread got rotten and it stunk up the whole camp and it was full of maggots. You know, on the Sabbath day, he said to them, gather 2 omers of the manna and the pheasant or quail or whatever it was, and don't try and go out on Saturday and eat it, but stay in your tents because this is supposed to be a Sabbath day. And yet people still went out and tried to gather food on the Sabbath day. And Moses was mad. He's like, when are you going to listen to my commands? When are you going to listen to what I'm telling you? I'm not just making this up for my own benefit and pleasure. This is what God wants us to do. The whole time. They get saved out of Israel. They just saw however long it took for the 10 plagues to happen, whether it was 10 weeks or 10 days or whatever. They saw the 10 plagues happen. They saw God lead them out of Israel. And then they get to the Red Sea, and the first thing they do is start to complain and say, well, God's going to let us die here. Then they're traveling through the desert. They're complaining that they're hungry. God gives them pheasant and manna, and eventually they complain that, is this all we're ever going to eat, is manna and pheasant? So God's like, oh, this isn't good enough for you? Find your own food, okay? Then they complain that they're going to die of thirst in the water. So what does God do? He brings water out of the rock, you know? And it just goes on and on. They complain. They uprise against him over and over and over again to one point, even in later in Exodus, where God says, Moses, this is a stiff-necked people, and I will kill every single one of them and make a nation out of you. And Moses stands up and says, no, Lord, don't do that. Don't do that, because then how will anyone know? They'll laugh and say, you led them out of Egypt just so you could kill them in the wilderness, you know? But they were stiff-necked. They understood they deserved punishment. They deserved judgment. Okay, and so that was the how they were perceiving in their spiritual sense, the chazah, in the spiritual sense of what they deserved. So, another thing I'd like to point out in that passage is that in a previous passage, that Moses had to select the leaders of the nations. He had to select those 70 men, and he had to do this by exercising his prophetic discernment. He didn't do it based off of his own judgment, but he picked, he didn't pick them how people looked or who they were or what kind of influence they had. He picked the people he discerned were brave and valiant, and that they were rich. And I thought to myself, well, Lord, why would they have to be rich? And he said, Deuteronomy 28, because to be rich means that you are blessed in all areas of your life, and you are not under a curse. You're blessed because you're following God, following his commands, and God blesses you for that. He promises to. And then it says, if you are poor and you're hurt in all areas of your life, you're under a curse. And there's a lot of different things that can cause you to come under a curse. So for them to be poor would have been considered a curse back then. Poverty, even Jesus teaches this, poverty is actually a curse. Now, I'm not saying short-term poverty, sometimes God will allow you to go through a time where you're in kind of like a poverty state where you have to trust him and rely on him and have faith. And he'll do that to help. He'll allow that to help build your character, and so that you'll have more faith. Brandy and I have been through that. It's very difficult. It was like a 2-year process for us, but we grew, we pressed in, we sought him, and he never, ever failed. And now our faith is stronger than it has been before. So he had to pick the people who were rich because they were not cursed. And that would show him, because they all lived this way, was that if they were blessed and they were rich, they weren't cursed. Therefore, they were living according to God's law and following his law. So then by picking the rich people that God told him to pick, the wealthy, or whatever people, he was actually picking people who followed the will of God. But, you had to discern that in the time and the culture, okay? So I just like to point that out. Now, we see a variant of the word chazan, which is the word hosa, which is in 2 Samuel 24:11, and it calls the prophet Gad David's seer. A hosa is a type of seer. And then in 1 Samuel 9:9, we see a what do you call it? A diminutive of the word, or a variant of the word ra'ah, which is roa seer, and that is a seer that sees with his eyes and understands, whereas Gad was the seer, the Hazan seer, that perceived with his, he discerned things and he perceived things. So dreams are a type of Hazan vision, okay? That doesn't mean that you're a prophet because you have dreams, but a lot of dreams are revelatory in nature, and some dreams are prophetic in the fact that they do foretell the future, and other dreams are prophetic in the fact that they're God telling you what his plan and purpose and heart is for you. So in some sense, you could say all dreams are prophetic, but I wouldn't say that. I would say maybe most dreams are prophetic when they're from God because it's revealing his heart and nature to you in some manner. But dreams that come from the enemy, which we're aware that happens, you can go watch our other videos, dreams that come from the enemy are not God's will for your life, right? So not all dreams are prophetic because not all dreams are revealing the nature of God to you, all right? So 2 Samuel 24:11, we see a variant of the word Hazan, Hosea, and then we see Roa in 1 Samuel 9:9, in case you needed to take notes. Now, Hazan vision is a revelation of God's plan or will for a situation. Now, and that, again, is a type of vision that's dreams. For example, Chazah is a type of vision in Nahum 1, and Nahum has all these words when you read it, from God that he says he received in visions, but it never says that he actually had the vision. He never explains the vision to you, and that's because he discerned it and perceived it rather than just having a vision. He heard God, he felt God. So you might be your way of hearing God might not be that you hear a physical voice or that you see actual visions or you see angels and demons and stuff. It might be that you perceive what God is saying to you, okay? Now, on the other hand, you have prophets like Daniel and Ezekiel that are seeing Ra'ah visions or Re'ah visions, which are a mix of literal and a little bit of symbolic. So Ezekiel 40, chapter 1, Ezekiel's taken to a high mountain, and he's shown everything through visions. And then in verse 4, we see someone, he sees someone that, he said, looks like a son of man, and that he had shined like bronze. It could be an angel, could be Jesus, who I don't know. It doesn't specify. I think it was an angel. And that angel reveals to him what God's plan is. Now, what you have to recognize is that he was taken in a vision, right? But he literally saw with his physical eyes and received a message from God. So this is the difference. Samuel, Daniel, and Ezekiel were those type of seers where they actually saw the things, especially in Ezekiel, I want to say Ezekiel 8, where he gets taken to Jerusalem. And it says he takes him up in between the heavens, the in-between. That's what Pergamum means. Pergamum means the in-between. So when it says seated, Satan's throne is at Pergamum, it doesn't just mean that he's in the city Pergamum. It means he's seated in the second heaven. He's seated in between first heaven and second heaven, okay? And so he goes to Jerusalem and he sees all the things that are going on in Jerusalem that with his physical eyes, but he's taken through visions. We can travel through visions. We can actually travel through visions because it is, when you have dreams and visions, is actually an access point into the heavenly realms, into the dream realms, which is where, when you study the word enupnion, in Greek, or in hypnion, I think it's pronounced enupnion, it means in the realm of, or in the sphere or realm of, dreams and visions. So if you have an enupnion dream, which is actually a Hazan type of dream, you are in the realm of dreams and visions. So that is a realm of heaven that you are able to access when you sleep. Now, some people illegally access that by lucid dreaming, and I mean intentional lucid dreaming, where they're trying to cause themselves to astral project. They project themselves into they call it the astral plane, but it's the second heaven. And a lot of times they do that, and they end up having to make contracts with different demons and stuff to do certain things and go certain places. But let's not get into that today. I'll teach on that some other time. All right, so Daniel has Rhea type of vision. In Daniel 2:19, we see Daniel gets a revelation of Nebuchadnezzar's dream. He says, he dreamed a dream, a vision of the night. And then was the secret revealed unto Daniel in a night vision. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel 7:1 says, Daniel had a dream, a vision of his head. So in both of these visions, they were Hazon visions, meaning that they were symbolic and they were revealing God's plan to him. All right. So Daniel would see his Hazon visions, and then he would also see Roa visions, but most of the time he would see the Hazon visions, meaning that they were symbolic and needed an explanation. So in one particular example, I believe in Daniel 7 or Daniel 8, he sees this vision, he's praying, he asks God for the interpretation, and God sends an angel and explains the interpretation to him, right? Job 33 now, I want to cover this because there is a false version of Hazon visions as well. And remember, Hazon visions are what we're having, or Hazan, however you say it, is what we're having when we're dreaming. They are the symbolic visions of the night. And typically, when you see the word dream in Hebrew, you typically see vision of the night when they're talking about an actual dream while they were asleep. So you see that pop up, a vision of the night. All right. Job 33:15, it says, we see it, it says, Halom Hazan Leila, right? In dreams and visions of the night is what it says. So, and that's when God speaks to you. They're night visions. God's speaking to you. He's giving you a dream. And a good portion of the dreams that you have every night do come from God. Usually more if you're submitted to God, if you love him. Otherwise, you could be tormented by demons all night long. Well, that's not fun. But that being said, that can happen where demons can also cause you to manifest a Hazon type of dream, but it's a dark Hazon type of dream. It's actually called a Hezayayu or something like that. That is a specific reference in this case in Job 4 to a dark demonic dream in a trance-like state, actually. So I had to cover this because when you have a nightmare, you know that's not from God, right? And when I talk about a nightmare that is not bright, I'm talking about one that's dark. We talked about this in the last episode of The Reality of Dreams. It's dark, it's not bright, it's demonic, right? So I had to cover this, right? Now, in Job 4, there's a dream that's delivered by a demon. Job 4:13. This particular vision occurred at night as the result of Eliphaz dwelling on his own opinions and thoughts rather than dwelling on the word of God. And because of that, he was torn. He was going back and forth. He was in disquieting thoughts, right? This particular instance wasn't in a sleep state either, because the word that's used for deep sleep in this verse is radam, and it means a state of lethargy or a trance. And remember, a trance is defined as a sleep-like state, usually characterized by partly suspended animation with diminished or absent sensory and motor activity. Okay, so he was actually in a trance, or what we would call sleep paralysis, or what some people, that state where people get into when they start to sleepwalk. That's that trance state. Now, in this, he had a Hazon type of dream, but it was not a Hazon type of dream from God. It was from a devil, and it was the result of him being in anxiety, considering his own opinions versus what God says about something. We know that that's the case because later in Job, I want to say 42:8 or 48, somewhere around in there, God comes out and tells Eliphaz, you and your two friends need to go to Job, ask for forgiveness, and ask him to pray for me, and he'll pray for you, and then you make a sacrifice so that I don't have to deal with you according to your folly because you said what's not right about me. He says that word for word. So we know that Eliphaz, the Temnite, and the other two people who were coming against Job were not saying, well, all these things sounded godly and righteous, but they were their own opinions. They weren't fact of the matter from God. Some of it was God, some of it was their opinion. Like we take Job 33:13, that's not from Job. I believe that was actually written by Eliphaz, but there's some truth in it. But then you see that there's other things in the book of Job that they're saying, well, you're not innocent, this, that, and the other. And then this demon delivers half-truths to Eliphaz and says, can a man be more righteous than his maker? Well, no, because God, he didn't make us to be more righteous than him. We're not better than him, but we can be his righteousness. God never changes. So if we can be God's righteousness now, according to 1 Corinthians or 2 Corinthians, it says we've been made the righteousness of God, or we are the righteousness of God through Christ Jesus because of what he did for us on the cross. So then that means that you could be the righteousness of God back then as well. So God doesn't change. That's not a new thing. So he says, can a man be more righteous than God? And insinuating that Job is blaspheming and is being idolatrous and elevating himself to a point where he thinks that he's better than God. But that's not the truth. He never said that. He never said he was better than God, and he wasn't elevating himself. No, we can't be more righteous than God, but we are the righteousness of God. You see what I'm saying? And so that's what demons do. They're slick. They take these things, they sound righteous and holy, but they're twisted and deformed. And so in that trance-like state, that sleep paralysis type state, that's where demons attack. And so that's what a nightmare is. That is also a Hazon dream, but it's a dark vision. And how do I know that demons can have visions? Can cause visions? Where's that in Scripture? Because it says that they cause their false prophets to have visions. One demon says, I will go and be a lying spirit in their mouth. That's not an angel that said that. That was a demonic spirit. No angel in heaven will lie, because then they'd be guilty of sin. They're not going to volunteer to go lie because they'd be guilty of sin. Okay? So Job 4 shows us that counterfeit Hazon moment. All right? So that is what I have discovered concerning the difference between dreams and visions, the difference between certain type of seer and how people see and their perception. So I know that this is probably a lot for you all to take in. And it's hopefully, if you didn't watch the beginning of this, go back and watch and listen for my fart flower story that I shared. I know that this is a lot to take in, and there's a lot of information here, and I'm pretty sure that you probably have not heard it from anyone else. If so, maybe one other person, because I don't think I've heard this taught. And to some degree, I do believe Brandy said that in Streams Academy they teach this as well. I would recommend Streams Academy. You go to streamsministries.com and sign up for that Streams Academy. It's awesome. It's like it's like $1,000, but it's a 6-month program, and you get one-on-one mentorship and discipleship with John Thomas and different teachers from Streams Ministries, and you also have group mentorship, group discipleship, and it's really worth every penny. So you'll learn a lot, how to hear God, how to interpret dreams. There's just so much to it. We're a part of it, and it's been awesome. So let's take a look at some of these comments, and I'll wrap it up here in about 5 minutes. Have the same problem, but I see at least being forced to eat healthier will be good for my health. Yes. Cauliflower is nasty. Yes. I think my students are eating cauliflower. They must be farting all over the place. Someone said, I happen to like cauliflower. I like cauliflower also, but it does smell like farts. But it tastes better when you put ketchup or ranch on it. Let's see. I have times when I wake up and is awake with my eyes closed, and I see images under my eyelids, and also sometimes get words. What do you call that? How do you interpret that? Well, I covered that in this lesson. So hello all, this is my first time here. The majority of my dreams are all natural disasters from childhood till now. I'd like to hear some of those and see what all is going on in your dreams. What about dream sequels, where one part ends and then another one takes off? A lot of times that happens, and that would just be, well, sometimes it just happens. Sometimes you just get on that wavelength, or maybe it's something that you cause yourself. I'm going to pray about that, and I might actually do a lesson about that, but I don't have a very clear, concise answer to give you right now, so I'm not going to force the answer based off of my limited knowledge. I'm going to research that, and I'm going to do a topic on that, so thank you for that. I have dreams inside of the dream, repeating the dream to God and asking Him the meaning and going back to sleep in the dream, and I have the dream and then seeing and looking on everything in the dreams. Yeah, great. That's like a prophetic gifting that you can operate there. All the dream sequels I had are all based on locations where I grew up going to. Well, that's basically talking about things that happened when you were a kid. Hello in Australia. Careful of that trans word now. I don't know if I said trans. I said trance. Trance. A fish vendor sells a large blue goldfish next to an empty swimming pool and a Lux liner. He said they drained the H2O from the pool because they dragged the fish across it. We waited for the water to be full again. It's a little confusing for what I'm seeing, but large blue goldfish, I'll come back to that sometime. I have dreams with me having light coming out of my pointer finger. People get healed. I keep going till the finger starts to frizzle out, but the light continues. Um, there's a scripture that pertains to that, okay? And I believe it goes like there's flashes of light healing from the hands, Bible verse. John Thomas would know this right off. Habakkuk 3:4. His splendor was like sunrise, rays flashed from his hand where his power was hidden. Um, there's healing in the hands of God. And his brightness was as the light. He had horns coming out of his hands, and there was the hiding of his power. So his power is in his hand. But when I hear that, I hear the healing coming from your hands and the flashes of light coming from your hands here, and that represents the power of God coming through your hand when you touch people. I dreamed of a strong wind that came from the sky that was coming to earth. I saw many trees moving back and forth from the wind, but the trees were not uprooted and did not lose any leaves. So a lot of times wind will represent spirit or the Holy Spirit. So there's a move of the Holy Spirit coming that's going to shake the leaders, but not necessarily uproot things that are well-rooted and well-grounded. Let's see. I'll wrap it up here. I dreamt that I traveled into what I thought was the future. There were no people or animals there, and I remember the number 9,902,020, as if that was the year, the month, or the year. So maybe that was like something that happened in 9/2/2020, because that was what that would be, right? 9/2/2020. So whatever happened 9/2/2020, maybe go back and look at that in your life, and you'll get an understanding of that. Because it's interesting if it was the year that's in the past and it's not actually in the future. So anyway, all right, guys. Love you guys. Be blessed. Sorry I didn't interpret anybody's dreams here. They were actually kind of confusing today because people are trying to condense them and making them strange. But love you guys. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being a part of this and being a blessing. Remember to like and subscribe. Let me play you a quick little clip of something here, and then... I had to make a little commercial so that I didn't have to sit here and ask you guys to sow into us and partner with us. But remember to sow, like, and subscribe. If you want to help us keep this going with everything that we do, with the prophecies on Wednesday, with the our books that we put out, the teachings we do, what we teach, the dreams, everything that we put out, the prayers we try and put out a video basically every day. So all of what you sow into us goes into the ministry and into people in the ministry. We actually, the only things that we keep are proceeds from books, courses that you purchase, life coaching, stuff like that. And we are not a 501c3, so we don't just take donations for ourselves. It all goes back into the church. So when we buy a house, we actually I think some people have sown into that. I'm not sure, but anyway, I guess that's not anybody's business. But when we go and do things, we just have what we have worked for, basically. So anyway, love you guys. Be blessed, and I will see you again in the very near future. Bye.